All right, thank you, Tucker. We appreciate it. Welcome all of you to Hannity. Tonight, we are broadcasting from the great city of Las Vegas for a very important reason. We're going to tell you why later in the show. Plus, we have tonight major breaking news developments in the real Russia collusion scandal. Tonight, the president has weighed in heavily on this scandal. Take a look.
If the mainstream media would cover the uranium scandal and that Russia has 20% of our uranium for whatever reason, and a lot of people understand what those reasons may be, I think that's your Russia story. That's your real Russia story.
Now, we will have the president's full remarks all coming up tonight. Meanwhile, the left-wing mainstream media has been lying to you for over a year about Russia. Tonight on this program, we will expose how the Obama administration knew and covered up one of the biggest national security pay-to-play scandals in this country's history. A full Hannity investigation into that later tonight. But first, Gold Star father, White House Chief of Staff John Kelly, General Kelly, completely obliterated Congresswoman Frederica Wilson and other Democrats and the liberal media for their disgusting, despicable, and utterly shameless attempts to politicize the death of an American soldier, all in an attempt to attack President Trump. So what these people are doing, it is morally repugnant. It is beyond disgusting. It is a slap in the face to the Americans who have fought, bled, and died for this country. Democrats, those in the media, you should be ashamed and embarrassed tonight. Now, tonight, you all owe Gold Star parents, the brave men and women that wear our uniform for this country, and the president an apology for even daring to politicize and use the death of an American hero to score your cheap political points. And that is tonight's very important news-breaking opening monologue. White House Chief of Staff General John Kelly, retired Marine general, whose own son was killed defending this country in Afghanistan in 2010, absolutely unloaded on Congresswoman Frederica Wilson, the Democrats, and the media earlier today. It was so emotional, so moving, and the best takedown of the press I have ever seen. We're going to show you all of General Kelly's comments, must-see comments, in just a second. But first, let me explain how the liberal media, the Trump-hating Congresswoman Frederica Wilson, are exploiting the death of an American hero in one of these most disgusting displays in American history. I'm going to tell you, this is sick. This is repulsive. It proves what we've been telling you. The left in this country has zero moral compass, and they will use anyone and anything to bludgeon President Trump. Now, Sergeant David Johnson, he's an American hero. He laid down his life defending this country. But instead of honoring his sacrifice and his family and trying to comfort his heartbroken and grieving family, what do we have? The liberal, ideological, mainstream media. We have a Congresswoman who hates President Trump, Frederica Wilson, using the dead body of an American soldier as a pawn in their sick and twisted political game to take down the president. Now just look at some. This is a tiny sampling of the many shameful ways the liberal mainstream media is exploiting Sergeant Johnson's death, all to attack the president. Watch this. It's nauseating.
He's so quick with a tweet. Why didn't we hear just basic condolences to the 4 men who fell in Niger, the 4 Americans who gave their lives for the country in Niger?
Because he tweets about things he cares about, Willie.
But no one can point to, what no supporter of Donald Trump can point to, is a shred of public evidence that Donald Trump cares about any pain that is not his own. There is simply no evidence that anyone's description of their pain can reach Donald Trump.
The problem that President Trump might have here, however, is that when it comes to sensitivity about service and sacrifice specifically, he's already made what critics have assessed to be some grievously bad decisions.
It is another example of President Trump's willingness to go lower than anyone else in American politics to try to build himself up. And it is disgraceful.
This just shows you how morally bankrupt the media in this country is. To them, nothing, including the death of an American soldier, is off limits when it comes to bashing President Trump. What they are doing is beyond disrespectful, beyond the pale. The media is literally spitting on the graves of every single American who has died defending this country and their rights to be stupid like they are every day. Then there's Democratic Congresswoman Frederica Wilson. Oh, she's the #1 Trump hater in the country. What she's engaging in orchestrating here is the epitome of gutter, bottom of the barrel politics. This woman is a disgrace to the U.S. Congress and doesn't have an ounce of shame in her body. Frederica Wilson saw the death of Sergeant Johnson, just as a way to manufacture a controversy and try and hurt the president, and that's exactly what she's doing. Watch this.
There's no reason for the president to be so insensitive, not only to the family of this soldier, but the impervious rhetoric is, it's disrespectful to the family of every soldier.
This man is a sick man. He's cold-hearted, and he feels no pity or sympathy for anyone. This might wind up to be Mr. Trump's Benghazi. So the president evidently is lying, because what I said is true. I have no reason to lie on the president of the United States. He needs to learn from past presidents, like President Obama, and be presidential during times like this. This gentleman has a brain disorder, and he needs to be checked out.
Really, Congresswoman? Your deep hatred of this president shows no bounds, no limits. What kind of person is doing what Congressman Wilson is doing here? Think about this for a second. How low, how pathetic do you have to be to try and manipulate the tragic death of an American hero for bitter, partisan, political gain? Make no mistake, this shouldn't be a surprise coming from Congresswoman Frederica Wilson. She has a very long history of doing nothing else but trashing President Trump. The media hasn't told you about this part. Wilson has called for the president's impeachment. She's labeled him a racist. She said he was crazy. And the list of insults, I can go on and on and on. But here's the bottom line. Congresswoman Wilson is a national disgrace. Her conduct is beneath the position that she has in the U.S. Congress. And while all of this is going on, the White House Chief of Staff, General Kelly, retired general now, Gold Star parent, has been sitting back watching what the media and the Democrats are doing. And keep in mind, unlike most of the president's critics, General Kelly actually knows what it means to serve the country. And more importantly, General Kelly actually knows the unimaginable pain of losing a family member in combat. By the way, he never got a call from President Obama. But earlier today, General Kelly, stepped into the White House briefing room and unloaded, rightly so, on Congresswoman Wilson and the media for their disgusting, shameless political tactics. And Kelly's emotional and powerful response is the single best takedown of the media I've ever seen. We're going to show you all of it. Watch this.
Most Americans don't know what happens when we lose one of our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, or Coast Guardsmen in combat. So let me tell you what happens. Their buddies wrap them up in whatever passes as a shroud, puts them on a helicopter as a routine, and sends them home. Their first stop along the way is when they're packed in ice, typically at the airhead, and then they're flown to usually Europe, where they're then packed in ice again and flown to Dover Air Force Base, where Dover takes care of the remains, embalms them, meticulously dresses them in their uniform with the medals that they've earned, the emblems of their service, and then puts them on another airplane linked up with a casualty officer escort that takes them home. A very, very good movie to watch if you haven't ever seen it is Taking Chance, where this is done in a movie HBO setting. Chance Phelps was killed under my command right next to me. And it's worth seeing that if you've never seen it. So that's the process. While that's happening, a casualty officer typically goes to the home very early in the morning and waits for the first lights to come on.
and then he knocks on the door. Typically, the mom and dad will answer, the wife. And if there is a wife, this is happening in 2 different places. If the parents are divorced, 3 different places. And the casualty officer proceeds to break the heart of a family member and stays with that family until, well, for a long, long time, even after the internment. So that's what happens. Who are these young men and women? They are the best 1% this country produces. Most of you, as Americans, don't know them. Many of you don't know anyone who knows any one of them. But they are the very best this country produces. And they volunteer to protect our country when there's nothing in our country anymore that seems to suggest that selfless service to the nation is not only appropriate but required. But that's all right. Who writes letters to the families? Typically the company commander, in my case as a Marine, the company commander, battalion commander, regimental commander, division commander, Secretary of Defense, typically the service chief, Commandant of the Marine Corps, and the president typically writes a letter. Typically the only phone calls the family receives are the most important phone calls they can imagine, and that is from their buddies. In my case, hours after my son was killed, his friends were calling us from Afghanistan, telling us what a great guy he was. Those are the only phone calls that really matter. And yeah, the letters count to a degree, but there's not much that really can take the edge off what a family member is going through. So some presidents have elected to call. All presidents, I believe, have elected to send letters. If you elect to call a family like this, it is about the most difficult thing you could imagine. There's no perfect way to make that phone call. When I took this job and talked to President Trump about how to do it, my first recommendation was he not do it. Because it's not the phone call that parents, family members are looking forward to. It's nice to do, in my opinion, in any event. He asked me about previous presidents, and I said I can tell you that President Obama, who was my commander-in-chief when I was on active duty, did not call my family. That was not a criticism. That was just to simply say, I don't believe President Obama called. Thing. I don't believe President Bush called in all cases. I don't believe any president, particularly when the casualty rates are very, very high, that presidents call. But I believe they're all right. So when I gave that explanation to our president 3 days ago, he elected to make phone calls in the case of the 4 young men who we lost in Niger at the earlier part of this month. But then he said, you know, how do you make these calls? If you're not in the family, if you've never worn the uniform, if you've never been in combat, you can't even imagine how to make that call. But I think he very bravely does make those calls. The call in question that he made yesterday, or day before yesterday now, were to 4 family members, the 4 fallen. And remember, there's a next of kin designated by the individual. If he's married, that's typically the spouse. If he's not married, that's typically the parents, unless the parents are divorced. And then he selects one of them. If he didn't get along with his parents, he'll select a sibling. But the point is, the phone call is made to the next of kin only if the next of kin agrees to take the phone call. Sometimes they don't. So a pre-call is made, President of the United States or the Commandant of the Marine Corps or someone would like to call. Will you accept the call? And typically they all accept the call. So he called 4 people the other day and expressed his condolences in the best way that he could. And he said to me, what do I say? I said to him, sir, there's nothing you can do to lighten the burden on these families. But let me tell you what I tell them. And let me tell you what my best friend, Joe Dunford, told me, because he was my casualty officer. He said, Kel, he was doing exactly what he wanted to do when he was killed. He knew what he was getting into by joining that 1%. He knew what the possibilities were because we're at war. And when he died, in the 4 cases we're talking about, in Niger, my son's case in Afghanistan, when he died, he was surrounded by the best men on this earth, his friends. That's what the president tried to say to 4 families the other day. I was stunned when I came to work yesterday morning and brokenhearted at what I saw a member of Congress doing. A member of Congress who listened in on a phone call from the President of the United States to a young wife, and in his way tried to express that opinion. He's a brave man, a fallen hero. He knew what he was getting himself into because he enlisted. There's no reason to enlist. He enlisted. And he was where he wanted to be, exactly where he wanted to be, with exactly the people he wanted to be with when his life was taken. That was the message. That was the message that was transmitted. It stuns me that a member of Congress would have listened in on that conversation. Absolutely stuns me. And I thought, at least that was sacred. You know, when I was a kid growing up, a lot of things were sacred in our country. Women were sacred and looked upon with great honor. That's obviously not the case anymore, as we see from recent cases. Life, the dignity of life, was sacred. That's gone. Religion, that seems to be gone as well. Gold Star families, I think that left in the convention over the summer. I just thought the selfless devotion that brings a man or woman to die on the battlefield, I just thought that that might be sacred. And when I listened to this woman and what she was saying and what she was doing on TV, the only thing I could do to collect my thoughts was to go and walk among the finest men and women on this earth. And you can always find them because they're in Arlington National Cemetery. I went over there for an hour and a half. Walked among the stones, some of whom I put there because they were doing what I told them to do when they were killed. I'll end with this. In October, April rather, of 2015, I was still on active duty, and I went to the dedication of the new FBI field office in Miami. And it was dedicated to 2 men who were killed in a firefight in Miami against drug traffickers in 1986. A guy by the name of Grogan in Duke. Grogan almost retired, 53 years old. Duke, I think less than a year on the job. Anyways, they got in a gunfight and they were killed. 3 other FBI agents were there, were wounded, now retired. So we go down, Jim Comey get an absolutely brilliant memorial speech to those fallen men and to all of the men and women of the FBI who serve our country so well and law enforcement so well. There were family members there. Some of the children that were there were only 3 or 4 years old when their dads were killed on that street in Miami-Dade. 3 of the men that survived the fight were there and gave a rendition of how brave those men were and how they gave their lives. And a congresswoman stood up, and in the long tradition of empty barrels making the most noise, stood up there and all of that and talked about how she was instrumental in getting the funding for that building and how she took care of her constituents because she got the money, and she just called up President Obama, and on that phone call he gave the money, the $20 million to build the building. And she sat down and we were stunned that she'd done it, even for someone that is that empty a barrel. We were stunned. But you know, none of us went to the press and criticized. None of us stood up and were appalled. We just said, okay, fine. So I still hope, as you write your stories, and I appeal to America, that let's not let this maybe lost thing that's held sacred in our society a young man, young woman going out and giving his or her life for our country. Let's try to somehow keep that sacred. But it eroded a great deal yesterday by the selfish behavior of a member of Congress. So I'm willing to take a question or two on this topic. But let me ask you this. Is anyone here a Gold Star parent or sibling? Does anyone here know a Gold Star parent or sibling? Okay, you get the question.
Well, thank you, General Kelly. First of all, you have a great deal of respect, Semper Fi, for everything that you've ever done. But if we could take this a bit further, why were they in Niger? What was, we were told they weren't in armored vehicles and there was no air cover. So what are the specifics about this particular incident, and why were we there, and why are we there?
Well, I would start by saying there is an investigation. They're there working with partners, local Africa, all across Africa in this case, Niger, working with partners, teaching them how to be better soldiers, teaching them how to respect human rights, teaching them how to fight ISIS, so that we don't have to send our soldiers and Marines there in their thousands. I mean, what the hell is my son doing back in the fight? He's back in the fight because working with Iraqi soldiers who are infinitely better than they were a few years ago to take ISIS on directly, so that we don't have to do it. Small numbers of Marines where he is, working alongside those guys. That's why they're out there, whether it's Niger, Iraq, or whatever. We don't want to send tens of thousands of American soldiers and Marines in particular to go fight. As I walk off the stage, understand there's tens of thousands of American kids, mostly, doing the nation's bidding all around the world. They don't have to be in uniform. You know, when I was a kid, every man in my life was a veteran. World War II, Korea, and there was the draft. These young people today, they don't do it for any other reason than their selfless sense of selfless devotion to this great nation. We don't look down upon those of you that haven't served. In fact, in a way, we're a little bit sorry, because you'll never have experienced the wonderful joy you get in your heart when you do the kind of things our servicemen and women do. Not for any other reason than they love this country. So just think of that, and I do appreciate your time.
General Kelly talking about his own son, talking about people like Sergeant Johnson. When we come back, the president weighs in heavily on the Uranium One, Russia collusion cover-up. We have so much breaking news tonight. That is next as we continue from Vegas. Welcome to Hannity, and we are broadcasting tonight from Las Vegas. Now we're going to explain exactly why later tonight, but first, massive bombshell breaking news developments in the biggest scandal ever involving Russia. Now we'll continue to do what the corrupt, lying mainstream media will not do, because we will prove tonight they are complicit in what is a huge cover-up. We're going to explain how the Clintons, the Obama administration, created a massive national security crisis by handing Vladimir Putin of Russia and the Russians 20% of America's uranium, which is the foundational material to make nuclear weapons. And tonight, we will explain in detail who and how many people knew that the Russians had infiltrated America's uranium market, and how all of this was all before the Uranium One deal. Now, that's the subject of tonight's mini monologue. Tonight, John Solomon, Sarah Carter, they're investigative reporters. They're the ones who have been breaking this Russia nuclear scandal wide open. Now, they're going to be joining us in just a little bit. And guess what? They have new stunning information tonight. Here's the headline from John Solomon's new report. It says, Bill Clinton sought states' permission to meet with Russian nuclear director during Obama uranium decision. Now, according to John Solomon, while Bill Clinton was getting ready to collect $500,000 for a speech in Moscow, double his normal speaking fee, he was also seeking State Department clearance to meet with a key official with the Russian nuclear energy company involved in this Uranium One deal. Sarah Carter also reporting, quote, U.S. consulting firms with ties to the Clintons lobbied on behalf of Russia's nuclear giant. Now, Sarah tonight is reporting that an American lobbying firm, that they took millions of dollars from a Russian state-run nuclear energy corporation, while at the same time providing pro bono services to the Clinton Global Initiative. And that's not all. These payments took place in 2010 and 2011. Well, that's when Hillary Clinton was the Secretary of State and helped approve this Uranium One deal. Now, earlier today, the president weighed in heavily on this Russian collusion, national security crisis, and this is important. Watch this.
If the mainstream media would cover the uranium scandal and that Russia has 20% of our uranium for whatever reason, and a lot of people understand what those reasons may be, I think that's your Russia story. That's your real Russia story, not a story where they talk about collusion and there was none. It was a hoax. Your real Russia story is uranium and how they got all of that uranium, a vast percentage of what we have. That is, to me, one of the big stories of the decade.
Thank God the president is speaking out. He is absolutely correct. And it is what we have been telling you now for months and months. Democrats, the fake news media, have been outright lying to you nonstop for over a year about Russia and what's really going on. Now, they have been creating distractions, feigning outrage, moral outrage, pushing black helicopter conspiracy theories, despite all the evidence that is in, and they had no evidence on their side. Now, this is all an attempt to conceal now the real truth from you, the American people, about Russia, about Vladimir Putin, and what is now his successful efforts to infiltrate the American uranium market. Now, all the evidence of corruption and criminal conduct in one of the biggest scandals in American history has been sitting right in front of the Democrats, right in front of the media. But because they're rigid ideologues, they're choosing to ignore it. And by the way, that makes them complicit in putting all of us in America in danger. Now, this new information that we have tonight builds on John Solomon and Sarah Carter's reporting from earlier this week. Now, here are the highlights of what we know now and why this is such a massive scandal. Now, back in 2009, the FBI discovered real evidence in the form of documents, emails, financial records from eyewitnesses and FBI informants that had infiltrated, on behalf of the FBI, the Russian nuclear industry and meeting with these officials. All on behalf, they're doing this on behalf of Vladimir Putin and Moscow. What were they doing? They were engaging in bribery. The FBI knew it. Kickbacks. The FBI knew it. Money laundering. The FBI knew it. Extortion and other types of racketeering and all sorts of other criminal conduct. So why was all this happening? Because Vladimir Putin had a goal. He set out to corner America's uranium market. Now, sadly, because of the Obama administration, he got Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Eric Holder, and all these others. Because of their stupidity, their ineptness, and their corruption, Vladimir Putin succeeded. Now, despite knowing all of this in 2009, when 2010 comes around, while the Russians were carrying out this bribery scheme, and they'd been doing it for over a year, and the FBI knew over a year, including Hillary Clinton and many others, they ended up still approving this corrupt Uranium One deal that gave 20% of America's uranium to Russia. There's also another massive part of this story involving the Clintons. Now, The Hill and CircaNews.com have also reported that the FBI has evidence. This includes eyewitness accounts that the Russian nuclear officials were funneling millions and millions of dollars to the Clinton Foundation while Hillary was actually serving as Secretary of State and personally signing off on the Uranium One deal. And according to both explosive reports, the Obama administration, they hid the evidence of this Russian bribery plot from Congress. There's an FBI informant. He wanted to tell Congress. He wants to share it with Congress today. And he wants to tell the American people. Well, what's happened? He's been threatened with lawsuits and retribution of all kinds. You, the American people, all of us should be outraged over what has happened here. And by the way, we all need to demand answers. Now, the Clintons and the Obama administration have created what is nothing short of a clear and present danger to those responsible. I say this, you need to be held accountable. You need to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. We're also learning that back in 2015, now this is 5 years after this Uranium One deal was completed, the New York Times, they reported that the Russian nuclear company, Uranium One, was actually exporting yellow cake uranium outside of the country to Canada, even though it didn't have a license. So basically, understand this, the Obama administration, President Obama, Hillary Clinton, Eric Holder, what they allowed in this deal was Vladimir Putin to export yellow cake uranium, which can be used to create nuclear warheads. And by the way, what he does with it, does anybody know? By the way, is he giving it to North Korea? Is he giving it to Iran? Nobody has any idea. This is a direct national security threat to every man, woman, and child, not only in this country, but around the world. And as we have been telling you, finally, the Senate Judiciary Committee has now announced they are launching an investigation into what top Obama administration officials knew about the evidence surrounding this corrupt Uranium One deal. There are several key players that need to be hauled before Congress, forced to testify. It needs to be under oath. They need to explain why they gave one of America's biggest adversaries control of 20% of our uranium supply. Then, of course, there's former Attorney General Eric Holder. Well, he was the head of the DOJ. They oversee the FBI. The FBI knew in 2009. He also sat on the committee that approved the Uranium One deal. There's no way that Holder did not know what Russia was trying to do. So it's time for Mr. Holder to start talking and answering questions. And then, of course, these names will all sound familiar. You have the Deputy Attorney General today, Rod Rosenstein. He's now, of course, he's second under the Department of Justice under our Attorney General, Jeff Sessions. And then we have Andrew McCabe. They were actually oversaw the FBI's operation into the Russian bribery case, so they clearly were well aware about what was taking place. So they need to be put under oath. They need to tell us why were they silent. Then there's now the special counsel, Robert Mueller. He was serving as the FBI director back in 2009 when the Russian bribery and money laundering all began. Mueller, too, he should not be leading any probes into Russian collusion. Guess why? He should be answering questions about the real Russian scandal, and he should be put under oath. Now, the conduct of Rod Rosenstein, Neil McCabe, Robert Mueller, frankly, is inexcusable. There's a massive conflict of interest. They've told nobody. And by the way, in no way can they be trusted to conduct a fair investigation into anything that involves Russia when they were involved in this massive scandal. So it's time for them to literally either resign, get out of the way, or come public with everything they know. As of my position, I think they've been compromised, especially when it comes to Russia. Now, it's well past time for many of them to go. These people are corrupt. They've been compromised. And finally, you got the liberal mainstream media. Now, for years, we've been telling you journalism is dead. They've been lying to you, the American people, for well over a year about Russia, Russia, Russia. Spreading fake news, conspiracy theories almost 24/7, nonstop. Now, why? Why are they so silent in this case? Because they've wanted to create as many distractions as possible to hide the truth. Now, here are just some of the examples of the liberal mainstream media in action, just to remind you. Take a look.
But first, we want to start with This Week in Russiagate.
It is as if there are no shoes on the Trump human centipede that are not about Russia. Russia, Russia, Russia.
This cloud about collusion with Russia will hang over him no matter where he stands.
It certainly feels like we're in the opening stages of a devastating political chapter in American history. Evidence is mounting for the president's meddling in the Russia probe.
Tom Friedman said the election hacking is at the caliber of a Pearl Harbor or a 9/11. Do you agree with that?
I completely agree with that.
Donald Trump now sits at the threshold of impeachment.
I personally think it's over. I don't think there's anything that can be done that can stop this at this point. Cacophony, this gushing of lies, problems, questions, chaos that will stop this presidency in its tracks.
You told the Washington Post last week that, quote, there's a smell of treason in the air when it comes to this investigation.
A lot of people are afraid to use the T word, treason, but in the end, that's what people are investigating.
It does look like collusion. It does look like he's listening to Putin more than he is American intelligence. And frankly, I've never seen that before.
The corrupt, rigid, radical, left-wing, ideological media. And, of course, their love of all things Clinton. They never investigated. How did Bill Clinton double his speaking fees in Moscow? And how, at the time, was he praising this deal while in Moscow? And the money flowing up to $145 million to the Clinton Foundation. She's signing off on the deal. By the way, where did that money really come from? Now, the media has so much concern about Russia, and Russia influencing America and the dangers of Vladimir Putin. Well, this could end up now being the biggest breaches of American national security in our history. And after them telling us how dangerous Putin is and how dangerous Russia is, this is beyond media malpractice. This is an agenda. The media does not care about the truth. They don't care about facts. They don't care about investigative reporting. Radical, rigid, left-wing ideologues who lie to you on a regular basis and are hell-bent on one thing and one thing only: destroying President Trump. It's why even after John Solomon, Sarah Carter's reporting, they have ignored this massive scandal. Imagine for just a second if Donald Trump ever gave 20% of America's uranium to Vladimir. How would they be reacting? And he got money kicked back to the Trump Foundation. Now, according to the Media Research Center, all network newscasts, they haven't touched this story. It's like a complete united blackout. The MRC found that CNN devoted a whopping 19 seconds to it. This is pathetic, and it proves a point I've been making now since 2007. Media in America is dead, and in this case involving national security, they are complicit, totally and completely complicit in this scandal. Unbelievable. Up next, Sarah Carter, John Solomon are here with an exclusive report, breaking news, new information. And later, I'm going to tell you why we are here tonight in Las Vegas. Stay with us. This is a Fox News alert. The Senate has just adopted a budget framework that will be key to passing President Trump's tax reform plan. Also tonight, new questions over the Clintons' involvement in the sale of Uranium One, a deal that gave 20% of America's uranium supply to Russia. Here now, these are the investigative reporters with all the new details. Joining us now from the Hill, we have John Solomon, and from Circa.com, we have Sarah Carter. All right, guys, let me start with you. We don't have a lot of time. I tried to lay it all out. John, I'll begin with you. Bill Clinton is going for his big payday, $500,000 speech. He wants to speak with members, one of the highest ranking officials to serve on the Board of Supervisors for this nuclear facility. Then he has to check in with Hillary's State Department. But then he meets with Putin himself. That had never been reported before.
Well, I think the Putin meeting's been out there, actually, but what hasn't been reported is that he had this interest in talking to several people that had interest in Hillary Clinton at that moment. And this is a pattern we see time and time and again with Bill Clinton, the foundation, right? If there's something pending at state, there seems to be something cooking at the foundation or the CGI or Bill Clinton speaking tour. And these are not coincidences, right? In the city of Washington, people try to get access to people like Bill Clinton because they have influence, and or his wife has influence. But
the bottom line is he is meeting and trying to meet with people involved in Vladimir Putin's scheme to take over the uranium market in the U.S. and getting paid for it at a double his normal speaking fee. Isn't that true?
It's a good
His wife's the
job.
Secretary of State.
It's a good job if you can get it. There's no doubt.
And Sarah, a good job is part of it. But Sarah, she's signing off on this. And then we got the back end part of the deal where all this other money is coming in. And in your report today, you got a firm that's working pro bono for the Clinton Foundation, lobbying on behalf of Russia's nuclear giant. Can you have a more incestuous group of people here?
Well, I think right now what we know is that the lobbying firm, APCO Worldwide, I have the contract right here. It was for lobbying for Rosatom, which is the main nuclear arm of Russia, and Tenex. So they signed an agreement. They also did pro bono work for Hillary Clinton. But let me tell you this, they were very emphatic when they spoke to me today that there was no connection, they said, between the Uranium One deal, the Clintons, and their lobbying on behalf of Russia.
We're going to believe them.
They were very emphatic about it. And I can tell you this, that one of the things that I want to stress here is that there is an informant, a former FBI informant, who's spoken through his attorney, and he is asking for a lift of his non-disclosure agreement with the FBI so that he can come out and talk. And one of the things that he really wants, Sean, is for some kind of immunity, some ability to tell his story and put those connections together, make those,
so this
connect
is the guy
those
that
alleged
infiltrated
dots.
on behalf of the in other words, they have all of this the email evidence, they have all of this evidence, they had people, eyewitness testimony, and he infiltrates, he knows everything, and they're shutting this guy up. Why?
Well, that's a question that we need to be asking our Justice Department, because this is no longer the Obama administration. This is the Trump administration. And somebody within the Justice Department or somebody within the Senate, Senator Grassley, is now asked to speak with him. And, you know, the executive branch, according to this informant's attorney, cannot evoke executive privilege if he wants to speak to Congress. So it may be a closed-door hearing. They may speak to him behind closed doors if it's classified.
All right,
but I think he has the right to speak.
Renaissance Capital, John, and I only have 30 seconds here, paid him one of the highest speaking fees he ever got, Bill Clinton. Right. They have ties to the Kremlin. They were talking up Uranium One, and they got him to talk up Uranium One.
Well, he definitely went and spoke there, and they had a direct interest, like many of the people that donated to Bill Clinton during this time frame. And so, listen, the pattern is there, and I have some breaking news tonight. House Intelligence Committee, they just started looking at this today.
Wow, unbelievable. All right, guys, we'll have more tomorrow, and we're going to get to the bottom of this. This is the real Russia collusion conspiracy and money kickbacks. It's disgusting. Laura Ingraham next as we continue, and I'll tell you why I am here in Vegas tonight. As we continue from Las Vegas tonight, we'll tell you why we're here in a minute. Joining us now with more reaction to John Kelly's powerful remarks earlier today, and of course all this breaking news as it relates to Uranium One, and the author of the brand new book, Billionaire at the Barricades, The Populist Revolution from Reagan to Trump, and soon to be host. When are you going to start working? I don't understand this. You get the show and you're not on the show yet. What's up with that?
October 30th, trick or treat.
Oh, finally. I have
trick
to wait,
or treat, Hannity.
Forever.
What are you dressing as? What are you dressing on? Can we coordinate our outfits for Halloween, please? Come on.
We can. John Kelly, I thought today, gave one of the most powerful beatdowns to the left, the media, and those that hate this president today.
Yeah, he basically said, how dare you? As a Gold Star father, someone who served his country in uniform, defending freedom, liberty, our sovereignty, how dare you politicize all of this? And it's the way Kelly says it, which is also so great, Sean. It's from the heart, very emotional. His love of country shines through, his deep devotion to America. And this is such a gotcha town that I'm in right now. I mean, you're in Vegas. I was in Vegas last night, by the way. We just passed each other. But this is a gotcha town. Everyone's gotcha, gotcha, gotcha. Everyone's ratting on everyone else. And I think Kelly comes out and says, this is about America. This is about our men and women in uniform who sacrifice day in and day out. We understand the sacrifices because this is what we do. And all of you who are wagging your fingers at Donald Trump, just take a pause, take a breath, and understand that, you know, the country is bigger than any one person. I thought I mean, I teared up. It was amazing.
So we've got this Uranium One issue now that is blowing wide open, and the media is ignoring it. You got bribery, kickbacks, extortion, money laundering, and what we now know is they knew in 2009, and they had all of this evidence in 2009. And they still, Vladimir Putin, who the media has been talking about for a year, clearly wanted to take over America's uranium marketplace. And in spite of all of that evidence, they shut down the eyewitness. They allowed this to go through, and
collusion.
Putin won.
Collusion. Collusion. It is this. We don't allow a whistleblower. He basically is a whistleblower informant to help Congress do its Article 2 oversight duties on all of this. Now, that's just bizarre. And Sean, if you ask anyone on the street, if you went out on the street in Vegas tonight and you said, okay, like China or Russia wants to buy X, and X would allow them to be much closer to a nuclear weapon, nuclear weaponry, advanced nuclear power.
Our sworn enemy.
Yeah, do you think the United States should allow a 20% of that to go to Russia or any country that is not our friend? And anyone off the street, I bet it'll be 98% of just people who don't know anything about this will be like, "Are you kidding me? Is that a trick question?" So there's a lot more here to be divulged, and the shame on the media for focusing on a fantasy of collusion.
They hit it.
And the Trump administration.
All right, I got to say two things to you. Number one, congrats on the success of your book. I know you're finishing your book tour. Number two, can you please come to work? We're
no
ready.
problem.
I'm
I'll
ready
be
to
there
say Laura Ingram's next. I'm sitting
10
here
days.
ready every night.
I got the football hands ready. I'm ready for that football, Hannity.
We'll see you on October the 30th. All right, we're in Las Vegas. When we come back, I'll tell you why. Straight ahead.
Premiering Monday, October 30th on the Fox News Channel.
And welcome back to Hannity. And we are here in Vegas tonight to participate in a benefit concert for all these heroic first responders and victims of the horrific Las Vegas shooting. Now, Big and Rich are playing tonight. Rascal Flatts are playing tonight. I get a chance to introduce them. Now, we're going to broadcast a full hour tomorrow night. We'll tell you the time later. And I think you're going to enjoy seeing this because they're all heroes. And I'm very impressed with the heroes.
This is a Fox News alert. Just moments.